Welcome to Morbid Outdoors, the podcast that ventures deep into the shadows of the wild. Here, we unravel the mysteries of missing persons, explore spine-chilling legends, and share the most morbid stories that nature has to offer. From the depths of the dense forests to the highest mountain peaks, we'll uncover the secrets that lie hidden in the great outdoors. Join us as we navigate the eerie, the unexplained, and the terrifying. So if you dare, grab your gear and let's embark on a journey into the unknown. This is Morbid Outdoors. Happy Wednesday, everyone. I hope you guys are all having a great week and looking forward to the holidays or just getting some time off of work to rest and relax. I am so excited. I'm going skiing tomorrow for the first ski of the season. So that's something I've been looking forward to. And I had a great Thanksgiving break, little time off of work to kind of, get a lot done off of my to-do list, but also to kind of, take some TLC. So it was a great Thanksgiving, spent it with my husband's family. And now I feel like I'm just trucking along with everyone else, gonna make it to Christmas. So I hope you guys are having a great week. And I want to know, what are some outdoors traditions that you do during the holidays? I know I have a friend who, for Thanksgiving, they usually pack up a sled. Yes, a sled. And they, with some friends, hike to a cabin in the backcountry and they have Thanksgiving that way. And I think that's a wonderful, fun, and super memorable way to spend Thanksgiving. And I'm curious as to if anyone else does fun holidays, outdoors adjacent, outdoors activities. So I want to hear what your traditions are. So either email me or drop them in the comments. I would love to know because I'm always looking forward to doing things a little bit differently. Actually, a couple years ago, my older sister and I spent Christmas Day hiking in Joshua Tree National Park. And then the day after Christmas, we were in Zion National Park hiking the Narrows. So I love the non-traditional Christmas. I think it's super fun and a really memorable way to spend a holiday. So I want to know what you guys do. So let me know. Let's head out into the morbid outdoors. While enjoying a hike to Pinnacle Lake and the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest, a mother-daughter duo were brutally murdered. Other hikers found their bodies and immediately alerted authorities. Was their killer another hiker on the trail? Was this a random act, or were the pair targeted for unknown reasons? Why was this mother and daughter shot in the heads while hiking? After 18 years, their case remains unsolved. So I've actually camped in the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. It was 2 or 3 years ago. My husband and I were on a road trip and we were staying just outside of Glacier, Washington. There are so many beautiful tall trees, mountain roads, and waterfalls. We did so much hiking, saw a lot of really pretty waterfalls. And while we were there, we were supposed to do more hiking, but it just so happens that the winter before, they had so much snow. It was a record-setting winter. And so it was June or July, and not all the snow had melted like it normally was. So I wasn't about to hike a lot in snow that was 7 feet tall. So I was no thanks. But it was really pretty to get to go experience that area and stay there. And I feel like I might be going back in the next couple years because I've got friends that are outside of Seattle and I'm so excited to go see them and spend time. And they're a family who loves the outdoors just as much as me. And so it's always fun to see friends and do some traveling along the way as well. Now for the bad reviews. Now, this specific trail has a negative review on all trails, and this person said, quote, "We wouldn't recommend this trail until two things happen. First, the 6-mile road leading to the trailhead is in horrible condition with terrible potholes. It hasn't been maintained for years. Just driving down the road added so much time to the day hike. Secondly, the trail is not well marked, and twice we found ourselves off the trail. Markers need to be added." End quote. Another review of the National Forest, someone said, "Super wet, full of trees, can't see anything. Too many bears. You should avoid this place at all costs. Check out Discovery Park in Seattle for a much better experience." So obviously this person loves the National Forest but doesn't want it to be filled with people. Another person said, "No views, millions of mosquitoes, people everywhere, cars getting broken into." Someone else said, "Don't go there, too dangerous, better yet, stay home." And my last review is someone that left a comment that said, "Too many hipsters with beards." Mount Baker National Forest was established as the Washington Forest Reserve on February 22nd, 1897, with just over 3.5 million acres. It became a national forest on March 4th, 1907, and was renamed Mount Baker National Forest on January 21st, 1924. So this forest has had a lot of change with names and boundaries and everything since. And the Snoqualmie National Forest was established from land in Washington National Forest on the 1st of July, 1908, with almost a million acres. And the two were administratively combined in 1974, so they were actually separate until the mid-70s. A cool fact about this is that in the 1935 version of The Call of the Wild, with Clark Gable, Loretta Young, and Jack Oakey, was actually filmed on location in the Mount Baker National Forest because 20th Century Pictures felt it was remote enough to guarantee lack of interruption from skiers and other forest visitors, which is almost laughable because there are so many people that frequent this national forest now. It's absolutely insane. But back in 1935, it was extremely remote. So the total area is 1.7 million acres. It's actually a little bit higher than that. And it's a huge, huge national forest. Here's your trivia fact of the day. This national forest is home to more glaciers and snowfields than any other national forest outside of Alaska. And yes, it's in Washington. How cool is that? It has 10 wildernesses, and the forest is also rich in lakes with about 800 lakes, mostly in alpine areas. There are more than 1,500 miles of hiking trails, including portions of the Pacific Crest Trail. This forest also provides a lot of opportunities for hunting, fishing, skiing, snowmobiling, snowshoeing, river rafting, bird watching, berry picking, picnicking, and sightseeing. I mean, really, you can find just about anywhere in this forest to do any kind of activity that you'd like to do. 19 federally recognized tribes still utilize areas of the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. And this forest was actually inhabited by their ancestors and used by their ancestors. They, along with interest groups such as environmentalists, recreationists, and timber industry representatives, take an active interest in the management of the forest and its resources. Now, guys, this is a super, super dense forest, and it's actually ripped open with jagged mountain peaks towering nearly 11,000 feet and covered with ribbons of well-maintained scenic highways. So it's just very picturesque. It's so beautiful. If you've ever been to this national forest, you know exactly what I'm talking about. The Pacific Northwest just has amazing national forests and hiking trails. It's just on another level. While the remote northern region of the forest is the most beautiful and pristine, it still remains easily accessible on a day trip from all major cities in the area. So the major city that is this forest is by is Seattle, and a lot of people will go out on the weekends to hike in this national forest. Let's talk about the trail that the mother-daughter duo was on. So this is Pinnacle Lake Trail, and All Trail says it's 4.2 miles out and back. So 2.1 miles in, 2.1 miles out. The elevation gain is just over 1,200 feet, and it's rated as moderate. This is the trail description from All Trails. Quote, try this 4.2-mile out and back trail near Granite Falls, Washington. Generally considered to be a moderately challenging route, it takes an average of 2 hours and 32 minutes to complete. This trail is great for fishing and hiking, and it's unlikely you'll encounter many other people while exploring. The best times to visit this trail are July through September. Dogs are welcome, but must be on a leash. End quote. A lot of us know that nature is supposed to be a place of serenity and renewal, and I don't think many of us think Washington or Oregon National Forests are dangerous in terms of people. But July 2006 changed that for a lot of Washington residents. It was clear that the trails may not be as safe as everyone had previously thought. On the morning of July 11th, 2006, Seattle hikers Susanna Stodden, who was 27, and her mother, Mary Cooper, 56, set out for the quick 4-mile hike to Pinnacle Lake and back. Sometime that day, somewhere on this short trail to the little alpine lake, these two women were shot and killed in cold blood. But let's rewind to January 9th, 2006. Mary was a mother of 3 daughters, Susanna, Joanna, and Elisa, and Mary was a librarian at an alternative elementary school in Seattle. Mary and her husband David had been married for 28 years, and they actually met while they were both students at the University of Washington, where she was known as a friendly and reliable employee who was loved by all of her coworkers. She returned to a school at the University of Washington several years earlier and had actually earned a master's degree in library science in 2004. Mary's daughter Susanna was 27 years old and an educator who had just returned from a trip to Nepal. Susanna had just gotten a job as an environmental educator at a private school. So Susanna really, really loved nature and the outdoors, and she was making it her career. She had actually graduated from Western Washington University in 2001 with a degree in environmental education. She also loved working with children and teaching them about nature and was so thrilled to find a job that was her doing exactly that. Like her mother, she was known as a sweet and friendly person with no enemies. She had met her boyfriend at a sustainability class, and she hiked with him at every opportunity. And in fact, right before this incident took place, she had actually just spent 2 weeks backpacking on the Wonderland Trail on Mount Rainier shortly before this happened. Their family was extremely active. Everybody loved to hike, and it wasn't unusual for Mary and Susanna to spend time in the wilderness, either going on a hike together or solo hiking. So Susanna was actually over at her parents' for dinner, and they actually lived in the Green Lake area. They discussed on going to hike in the next few days. The next day, Mary actually told her friends that she was looking forward to venturing into the woods with her daughter. School librarians have, they have summer breaks just like teachers. And so she was kind of working a little bit because it's not the exact same as teachers, but she was busy kind of tending to duties, and this hike for a break was really welcome. She was really looking forward to doing that. So 2 days later, on July 11th, 2006, Mary left her home at around 8 a.m. to go pick up Susanna. They were going to go on this hike together, and they were really looking forward to a mother-daughter experience. David, who is Mary's husband and Susanna's dad, he was a contractor who renovated homes, and he was actually planning to spend the day working on a house near where they lived in Green Lake. Mary said goodbye to him and told him that she should be home right around 4:30. She then got into her purple Dodge Caravan and drove away, and that was the last time that David saw her alive. Mary and Susanna had actually planned to hike to Mount Pilchuck, but they changed their minds, and people think that they probably changed their minds last minute due to the amount of snow on that trail. So instead of doing Mount Pilchuck, they decided to head for a nearby hike at Pinnacle Lake instead. They arrived at the trailhead at about 10 a.m. and they parked their car and started hiking to the lake. And I just want to remind everyone, this road to get to the trailhead is 6 miles and it's incredibly rough. I don't know exactly how they got their car out there. I've seen like cars do crazy things on Forest Service roads, but if you're driving this, you're not just like driving to just go drive by a parking lot. You are going over major potholes, over major rocks, and it takes a long time to drive on a road like that. So if you're driving on this road, you are setting out to go on a hike and nothing else. On this day, there were only a few other hikers on the trail because when Susanna and Mary got to the trailhead, there was only a few cars there. So like I said, kind of remote, really, really bad road with deep potholes, huge ruts, and massive rocks. Like I said again, you are not going to drive this just for fun. So at around 5:30, David arrived back to their house and he was surprised to find it empty. He had expected Mary and Susanna to be there by now, and although he had expected Mary to be home already, he was surprised, but he wasn't like overly worried. Because he knows like plans change, things happen, and it was just an hour. They were just an hour overdue at that time. So David actually decided to go cycle because he was training for an upcoming 200-mile cycling trip from Seattle to Portland, Oregon. He had arranged to go on a bicycle ride with his friend in Seward Park that evening. So he left the house and he went to meet up with his friend to go cycle. People that know this case often look at this as like, oh, he knew something. And I'm like, he didn't know anything. His wife and daughter were only an hour late. That's not major. In fact, my husband wouldn't call the cavalry if I was just 1 hour late, right? And David didn't think this was weird either. So he decided to go do his cycle. It was already planned. But when he got back home at 8:30, he really started to worry because Mary wasn't answering her phone and she had not left a message. I know for a lot of us, if we're overdue and we can get in touch with someone, I usually am like, hey, I'm going to be late. I send a text or I use my satellite phone to send a text just so that my husband knows not to worry. But Mary hadn't done that and she wasn't answering any calls. Obviously, the first thing that David thinks is that they had an accident on the trail, and he called the police in Snohomish County and told them that his wife and daughter had planned to hike to Mount Pilchuck and might be lost or hurt. So he did the right thing. He called them. He was like, hey, they were doing this. They're not home. I'm worried. And the dispatcher said that he would check with authorities in Mount Pilchuck where the trail was located. And David waited for a response, and he was repeatedly calling Mary and Susanna's cell phones, desperately hoping for a response. At this point, he is getting so panicked that something bad has happened. But all of his calls ended up going to voicemail. And by 9:30 p.m., he was preparing to make the 90-minute drive to Mount Pilchuck when detectives from Snohomish County Sheriff's Office unexpectedly arrived at his house. The deputies had grim news to deliver to David. They confirmed to David that both Mary and Susanna had been found dead on Pinnacle Lake Trail, and their bodies were found 2 miles from the start of the trail. Their cause of death hadn't been determined yet, but the deputies told David it was possible that they had been victims of an animal attack. Now, obviously, a lot of times when there are deaths outside, it's often assumed to be an animal attack first. Just like in October of this year, a man was killed in his tent and people thought it was a bear attack, but it was actually homicide. And the same thing happened in Mary and Susanna's case. Now, when detectives told David that they were on Pinnacle Lake Trail, he was actually kind of shocked because he thought that they were going to be hiking to Mount Pilchuck. And if David had gone to look for them, he would have gone to the wrong area because they did not update him about their plans. And so this whole time, he's thinking, oh my God, they are hurt on Mount Pilchuck. I need to go help them. And that's when he got the devastating news about his wife and his daughter. One, they were not on Mount Pilchuck. And two, they were deceased. Upon further investigation, it became clear that Mary and Susanna had not been victims of an animal attack, but had been brutally murdered in cold blood. Both women were shot in the head. Some of their clothing had been removed, but there was no evidence of sexual assault. However, some reports mention them possibly being posed in some way. They had been carrying backpacks with cell phones and wallets, but none of their belongings had been taken, so robbery as a motive seemed very unlikely. There was no attempt made to hide their bodies, as they were only pulled a short distance off the trail and actually were easily visible to anyone walking by. The killer hadn't bothered to conceal the bodies in any way with brush, wood, or other materials, and this is what stumped investigators the most. They were absolutely puzzled by this. Analysis by firearms specialists indicated that the shooting had been with a small caliber handgun. The investigation began, and it was actually really slow going from the start. Now, this is who found Mary and Susanna. It was a retired music teacher and a doctor hiking the trail just in front of the women, and they heard something that sounded like thunder and retraced their steps, and that's when they found the two women. Another hiker called 911 at 2:30 to report the incident. So from what I read online and have heard this reported, these two people found them. They alerted someone else that was nearby, and that hiker pretty much, went to the car area and got someone on 911. And I think that's the most shocking aspect of this case, is that these two hikers were just in front of Mary and Susanna. They heard a sound, and so, a sound that you wouldn't normally hear, and so that kind of set off alarm bells for them, and they retraced their steps. So basically, retracing your steps on a trail is turning around and going the way you just came, and that's when they discovered Mary and Susanna. And the crazy thing is, where was the shooter? Where was the shooter? This is the most bizarre case ever. Since there's nowhere else to go on that trail, you go up and you come back down the exact way. So whoever killed these women passed other hikers on the way back to the trailhead and parking lot. Why would the perpetrator kill two defenseless women, knowing that they had to hike 2 miles back to their car and carefully drive 6 miles down the dirt track to get away? Or did the killer escape into the woods somehow? Was the killer just waiting along the trail for whoever happened to walk by? Or was the sole purpose of randomly killing someone the motive? I think for me, this kind of feels like someone wanted to see what it felt like, and this was a good opportunity for them. I don't know. No one really knows. This is something that investigators struggled with the entire investigation. They theorized that Mary and Susanna had met someone at a gas station that had followed them, or possibly they encountered someone at the trailhead beside the couple. So it's like, were they hiking with someone else, or did someone follow them? Those are the only two things that investigators are actually thinking happened. This case got a lot of tips. In fact, they received over 300 tips, and the FBI actually offered up a profiler to work this case because it was so bizarre and random, it felt like. A few days after the attack, a witness posting to the northwesthikers.net forum said, quote, "I have not spoken of this to anyone except the authorities, but the genuine concern on this thread prompts me to speak up. I don't want to jeopardize the investigation by saying too much, but I am having a hard time keeping clammed up. My wife and I were the last normal people to see Mary and Susanna alive. They and we arrived at the trailhead at the same time, and we had a pleasant conversation with them before we headed up the trail. They were reading the board at the trailhead as we headed up, and presumably they followed shortly after. They seemed like exceptionally nice people, and if we had had the same itinerary, we might have hiked with them, which haunts me because then I wonder if this would have happened if we had been a group of 4 instead of just 2 women. But we were heading up to the East Ridge Scramble route on Pilchuck, and they were just going to the lake, and we needed to move fast because we were already getting a late start. So we took off and did not see them alive again. On our way up, we saw no illegal activity going on, nor any other people. On our way down, we came upon the scene. I cannot describe it again. Authorities haven't released any info, and I am not at liberty to reveal what they have chosen to hold back. But I will say this. We heard no gunshots at any time, even though we were never more than a couple crow fly miles from the scene, and the bodies were not in a fetal position, despite some reports to that effect. I can say no more about that. I can also say we have never spent a more terrifying half-hour hike back to our cars to the trailhead. We had one ice axe between us, which I held at ready the entire time, not knowing if we would be attacked by a killer still lurking in the area. At the time, we did not know that the scene had already been discovered and reported by someone else. We did not know Mary or Susanna before we met them at the trailhead, but we feel a horrible sense of loss that someone we met going out for a pleasant day hike had just had that happen a couple of hours later." End quote. After the incident, a lot of hikers modified their hiking habits. Some actually decided to keep doing things how they were doing them before. Some decided to hike in pairs. Some started to carry guns. And some hikers avoided this area completely. There are only 5 armed law enforcement officers working the entire Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest. That was a statistic from back then. I don't know if that number has increased, but it doesn't matter. This is 1.7 million acres of public land. It's larger than the state of Delaware, and they only had 5 armed law enforcement officers working in this huge area. And the reason why this is shocking is because the Mount Baker-Snoqualmie is the 4th most visited national forest in the country, largely because it's within a 70-mile drive from 3.6 million people in the Puget Sound area. That's why this place is extremely visited. In 2007, there had only been 2 confirmed murders on Forest Service lands in Washington. The first was when a man pushed his wife over a cliff in 1992 in the Olympic National Forest, and then in 2004, when 3 men killed a woodcutter after he stopped to ask them in the Okanogan National Forest in eastern Washington. So the fact that Mary and Susanna were both murdered on the same day while hiking was absolutely astonishing to a lot of people. This area is relatively safe, and everyone just goes to have fun and to admire the majesty of the outdoors. But there are predators that are within our public lands. About 1,500 people attended the memorial service at a high school where a line of speakers affirmed what most people already knew, that Mary and Susanna were the kind of people that other people aspired to be like. They were kind, peaceful, socially conscious, giving, salt-of-the-earth individuals who lived quiet but fruitful lives. So who did this and why? I think many of us automatically think of the partner or husband because of statistics, and that's exactly what police did in this case. Police were initially suspicious about David because him and his 2 other daughters went hiking together in Mount Baker-Snoqualmie National Forest just a few days after Mary and Susanna were murdered. Some people found this behavior suspicious, and the sheriff's office definitely saw David as a person of interest at the time. Hoping to clear his name, David agreed to take a polygraph test, and according to investigators, the results were inconclusive. David continued to insist that he was innocent and agreed to take a second polygraph. Detectives never released the result of his second test, but they never named any suspects either besides David. They noted that it was likely a random crime, which made it nearly impossible to solve. And in October of 2018, David voluntarily arrived at the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office to take his third polygraph to convince detectives to eliminate him once and for all and focus on finding the real person who did this to his wife and daughter. Quote, "They sort of said they weren't going to work on the case unless I passed a polygraph, so I did decide to finally take it." That's a quote from David. He passed the test, which included questions asked multiple times about whether he was involved in the deaths. Now, an agency spokeswoman for the sheriff's office, Courtney O'Keefe, said, quote, "The spouse did come in today and did a polygraph exam, and he did pass, and detectives do not believe that he is involved. At this point, there is no new information, no new suspects," end quote. David said, quote, "I feel better. Maybe now when I come to see the detectives, we can talk about somebody else. I guess I'm just trying to get Mary and Susanna's case moved up a bit. I'm just trying to get people to come forward. I can't get in a hurry unless someone gets Jesus and comes in," end quote. Over the years, David has posted flyers and placed ads in newspapers in search of information about the murder of his wife and his daughter. He has regularly hiked the same trail where the women were killed and often brought reporters with him. He and his family walk Green Lake on the anniversary of the slayings in honor of his daughter and wife. He has also put up flyers on the trail, often having to replace them as someone started to use them as target practice, which is so bizarre and disrespectful, in my opinion. Susie Provenzano, one of David's sisters from whom Susanna was named, was told a couple years after the Pinnacle Lake murders that a friend of a daughter was hiking up there the Sunday before the killings. The hikers reportedly felt like they were being watched and turned back. They just felt creeped out. And so I think that's an excellent example of listening to your gut, because we as humans have evolved, but one thing still is those primal instincts. Your gut often knows something's wrong before your brain does. And so I always say, listen to your gut. I've had a similar experience on a trail, and I'm so glad that I listened to my gut, because who knows what could have happened that day if I kept pushing forward. One theory is that Israel Keyes was responsible for their murders. Now, if you're unfamiliar with Israel Keyes, he's a prolific serial killer who was active for a very long time and never got caught because he never followed like a pattern, and his murders were all over the United States. He killed at least 11 people between 1998 and his arrest in 2012. He did live in Washington State at one time, and at least 4 of his victims are thought to be from that area. The day that Mary and Susanna were murdered, Keyes had rented a car from Hertz. 3 hours before the women went hiking, he had multiple phone pings and transactions in Nea Bay, which is about 4 to 5 hours from Pinnacle Lake. 2 hours after they were noticed to be missing, he had more transactions and more cell phone pings in Nea Bay, which again closes the window of possibility to almost being impossible for him to have been in that area. A lot of people still think he's the one responsible. I don't know if we'll ever know the answer to that. Keyes was also a sexually motivated serial killer, and from what he told the FBI, he liked to strangle his victims as he wanted that personal intimacy and control, which is super fucked up. Usually for him, strangling victims to the point of passing out and then waiting on them to wake back up and doing it over and over and over again was something that he took pleasure in. He also told the FBI he only shot one victim, whose name was Bill Courier, because he had lost control of him. So only one of Keyes' victims was ever recovered, and that's because he led the FBI to where her remains were. Now, the FBI and other investigators seem to believe that he is not responsible for Susanna and Mary's murder. However, armchair detectives say it could be true. The reason why the police don't think this guy is the guy for this is because They were shot and not strangled. There were no signs of sexual assault, and their bodies were left out right in the open. The FBI and local law enforcement agrees that Israel probably didn't kill these women. Like I said, a lot of people still think he could be responsible. It's believed that Israel Keyes was active way before 1998, and we don't really have a true count of all of his victims. So, is it possible? Yes. Do police think that he's responsible for these 2 murders? No. According to reporting done by Eric Stivic in a 2016 article at Herald, the FBI created a timeline of his travels and in 2013 concluded it was highly unlikely that Keyes was connected to the Pinnacle Lake murders. That theory hasn't changed in the years since. Basically, that's what it was. I don't really know if I agree with this, but anything's possible, and even something being highly unlikely could still have happened. Despite his wife and one of his daughters being murdered in 2006, David has gone long distances over the past 10 years and undertaken great physical challenges. His travels afar somehow bring him closer to his wife and his daughter, who also cherish their time outdoors. He has run marathons in Boston and Pittsburgh. He ran across the bottom of the Grand Canyon twice. He has climbed Mount Kilimanjaro and the 22,838-foot Mount Aconcagua, the tallest in the Andes. I cannot say that. I'm so sorry. So right now, David is 75, and he's still hoping to learn who did this to his wife and daughter and why. Quote, "Someone out there knows something. Maybe now, all this time has passed, someone breaks up with their husband or boyfriend, or someone dies, and a person isn't afraid of coming forward anymore. And hopefully, they will come forward. These cases are solved. It just takes the right information, the right tip, and the right person coming forward, and then we can make some progress on it. I'm not ready to accept if it will never be solved, but it is going to take somebody from the public coming forward. I really believe with good information, who's willing to have some courage, it will happen," end quote. That's from David. And I think his most recent interview was in 2021. And there have been no updates on this case in years. I mean, this is a true cold case. It kind of was a random crime, or so they say, and there's no DNA, or if there was, they're not releasing any of that. And I really believe that police know more, but they're not releasing it to protect the integrity of the investigation. Now, let's go on to theories. It was obviously another hiker, but why? Did someone try to assault Mary and Susanna, and they fought back, so he shot them? Was it completely random? There's no mention of DNA, like I said, and there's no mention of anything suspicious happening besides their murders. This is truly any hiker's worst nightmare. If you know anything about the murder of Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden, you're encouraged to call the Snohomish County Sheriff's Office tip line at 425-388-3845. As always, recreate responsibly, and remember, sometimes the great outdoors aren't always great. Thanks for listening to Morbid Outdoors. If you're enjoying what you're hearing, make sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast platform. It's free, easy, and it helps us out immensely. When you subscribe, you get updates on our latest episodes, and it also boosts our visibility, making it easier for other curious souls to find us. Another great way to support Morbid Outdoors is by leaving us a review. Whether you're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, a quick review helps us know what you love about the show. Find us on Instagram and Facebook at Morbid Outdoors Podcast. You can email us case suggestions and your campfire stories at morbidoutdoorspodcast@gmail.com. Thanks so much for the support, and I'll see you next time.